I really enjoy spoon carving, primarily because it's such a contrast to the work I typically do in the workshop. Usually, my work is dominated by straight lines and fixed dimensions, and spoon carving allows me to let go of the rigidity of box making and furniture building and do something a little more sculptural where the stakes are lower, and it's frankly quite relaxing to whittle a spoon from a piece of wood. I'm going to whittle a spoon similar to this one from this piece of mahogany. It's seasoned and left over from some previous project of mine. I don't recall which. Now, it would be nice if I was whittling a spoon from, say, a piece of apple wood that I harvested from an orchard my grandfather planted at the end of the Depression, but I live in Brooklyn and I'm going to have to work with what I have. This mahogany is seasoned, but it's a very strong wood without being excessively hard. What's really good about wood harvested from an orchard or not just fruit trees, but a variety of trees produce woods that are really nice for carving spoon is when they are unseasoned, that is to say they still have a high moisture content, they're easier to carve. A lot of woods get pretty hard when they're allowed to dry out, when they become seasoned. So mahogany is one of those few that performs just as well when it's seasoned as opposed to when it's still wet. I am going to lay out that spoon right along here, cut my blank out, and we'll just go through the various steps to get from raw stock to a finished spoon. That's pretty much the rough size, approximately, that my spoon is going to be. So now I'm going to grab my saw and just cut that out. So my go-to saw for cutting the wood out of this blank is this Ryoba from Japan. It's got two sets of teeth. On one edge is a somewhat more aggressive and wider space rip teeth, and a rip cut being the cut that goes longitudinally down the length of the board. And then on the other edge is my crosscut teeth, which I'm going to use to cut the end off. Across the grain is a crosscut. So I've done my layout, my lines are on, and it's time to get to work. Nice. Now it's time to lay out the specific spoon shape. Now in terms of what my spoon looks like, the length and the shape and its utility, I have a couple of preferences. Most of the spoons I carve tend to be borderline scoops because I like to take my spoons when I go camping or an outdoor trip, so they end up doing double duty. They scoop and cook and then I eat with them. But that doesn't mean I don't occasionally make a spoon like this, which is more long with a shallow bowl for just eating in general. So this one I am going to stick with my whole theme of multi-purpose. So it's going to have a somewhat deep bowl, which is why I'm working with a relatively deep piece of stock here. I like to mark off the area that's going to be the head, just a few control lines, and I try to get a sense of where the center is going to be so the spoon is somewhat symmetrical. But I also have to work pretty hard not to turn this into one of my usual carpentry projects dominated by fixed distances and a lot of rigidity. So that's about it, and from here on in it becomes more rough sketching. So I think I want the neck about that long, and the width of the bowl is going to be pretty much the stock. I'm going to start with the idea of a relatively round bowl, although maybe it'll be more egg shape. So I'm not too worried about it being super artistic right now because there's a lot of wood to be moved and there's plenty of time to adjust the shape. I also like some curve in the handle, But for starting, I tend to start with just pretty much a straight handle. And then when I get to the bottom, I widen it just a little bit. That's it. That's my very rough start for the spoon. I'll put another line here, and I'll cut that off again. And some of this wasted wood right here, I'll probably use the saw to help me quickly get to that by just roughing that out and leaving the spoon shape. Once I have the top done, I'll flip it over and work on the sides. I've done a couple of things with my stock to accelerate my progress. Here's a few tips. Once I've drawn in the rough shape and size of the spoon, then I know I can cut off any wood that doesn't represent the length and any wood that doesn't represent the width. And now this is a much closer approximation to where I'm going with the spoon. The other thing that I've done is made a series of cuts with my saw that allows me to knock out fairly quickly. It's really rewarding to do the parts of the outside, the extreme outside, where I know I don't need to do careful. And that happens pretty quick and easy. You can see I've even knocked some of them off there already. It's just a matter of bearing down a little bit with my knife, and that starts to cut them off really easy. So that helps me to really jump this project forward, where within a few minutes I have something that already has a rough shape that's very close to the shape of a spoon. Before I go any further, I want to talk a little bit about the tools, how I select the tools for each job, and how I hold them. These are the Garrett Wade spoon carving knives. They're my go-to tools for whittling spoons or any other free shape. There's a straight blade made in your classic Sloyd knife style, a deep curve for the kind of spoons that I like to make, which end up having somewhat deep bowls, and a shallow curve for spoons that just have a modest amount of depth to them. For this particular spoon, I suspect I won't need the shallow curve spoon. I'm going to be using the straight blade and the deep curve. They're my favorite knives because we have taken what is a very old traditional Swedish spoon carving design and enhanced it. Of course, there's this really nice brass ferrule that's on it, but the handle is made of rosewood, so it's a much more solid feeling knife. The original version has a somewhat lighter wood. That's still a very effective tool, but in terms of holding a tool and making carving shapes for several hours, I find that having a spoon carving knife with a solid, somewhat heavy handle is much more effective for me. So those are the tools I'm going to use for this. While I'm roughing out the large shape for this spoon, one of the important things to keep in mind, especially if this is your first time testing out spoon carving, is being safe with it. So as you carve the spoon, you're going to rotate the stock and your knife in a variety of positions. And no matter which position you're in, you want to make sure that any move you make with the knife, if it slips, and your knife does slip when you're spoon carving, the direction of travel does not intersect with your hand. So here I'm cutting down, and if for some reason I slip off and run off there, it won't cut me. Occasionally, you might be tempted to cut towards you. I don't recommend it. Re-manipulate the piece and jam it against anything you can, not your thigh, and do what's necessary. So here, I could easily be gripping this up here, but I don't want the knife hitting my hand, so I'm gripping it way in the back and going forward. Another way to deal with that is to hold it at the top and work below my hand. And when all that rough stuff is gone, I simply flip it over and get the parts that I had been holding before. This is a very sharp knife, and the most important factor to getting good results in any kind of woodworking, frankly in any craft, even in cooking in the kitchen, is having a sharp tool. I won't discuss tool sharpening much here, except to say, watch one of my other videos where I go in great detail about how to keep your tool razor sharp so you can make good progress with it as you go, and also keep it safe so you're not bearing on it with excessive force for it to make a cut. My tool is so sharp that I'm using very modest energy to get the cuts that I'm getting in the wood right now. Now, because keeping your tool sharp is such an important part of this process, I actually don't wait until I'm done or even wait until the tool is dull before I resharpen it. Every now and then, every few minutes, I take this strop here, which is already charged with some stropping compound, and I just make the usual trailing strokes to rehone, keep myself working with a razor sharp edge, and I get back to work. So now that I have what is primarily a spoon-shaped piece of wood, I don't need to refine that shape down anymore. There are a couple more stages I need to make happen to get it well on its way. So I'm going to stop and switch from the straight-bladed knife and work on the bowl of the spoon with my deep curved knife. One of the things that's happened along the way here, which is, again, the beauty of spoon carving, I've ended up with an overall shape that's a little bit smaller than what I really wanted, but it's still a great spoon. Obviously, that would have been disastrous if I was building a cabinet or some other very controlled piece of furniture where dimensions are everything. It just changes the design slightly and perhaps the final purpose of my spoon, but I'm still pretty happy with it. So I'm going to move to giving the bowl some shape now. Now that I have 75% of the shape of my bowl in the spoon established, I'm going to stop there and work on the profile. So that means I'm going to grab my pencil again and come in here and think about how deep of a spoon I want to be. That way I know really how deep I need to go on the inside. And so I've moved away from the idea that this is going to be a semi-scoop, and now it's just a straight up spoon, a somewhat smaller one. And I wanted it at the beginning, but that's okay. So here is the approximate bottom of the shape of that spoon. Very rough pencil lines. Again, they're just guidance. In the end, when I'm carving it with my knife, when I'm whittling it with my knife, that'll be the true arbiter of what the shape is going to be. Because I know, for example, the front isn't going to be chunky like that. There's probably going to be a much more dramatic lift of the front bottom like that. And then as the handle comes back, I like when my handle dips down a little bit. I tend not to like when my handle just goes straight back. So this upper section that's perfectly straight, I'm really going to take down probably to this area right here. Something like that. So all this wood right here will be wasted away. And then correspondingly down at the bottom, that line will be parallel. And I also like a swell at the end of my spoon. Just a little added ergonomics. So I'm gonna just do a rough pencil in here. And right here in the neck, I like when the spoon has a curved, graceful neck. So I'm gonna come up kind of high in this zone. And it may or may not be the final spoon, but again, it's guidance for my knife. So I know I'm gonna waste away all that wood down there. The first of it will be big aggressive cuts, and as I get closer to my line, I'll slow down, take smaller cuts, be more conservative, be judicious, and monitor my shape as I go. The next couple of steps are very similar to the steps that I've passed. So if you can get your spoon to this point, then you've already practiced all the skills that you're going to need to get it all the way to the end. Remember to hone your tools as you go. Don't wait till they're dull before you bring them to the strop or whatever sharpening rig you have at your place. Here's a little bonus item that I've made, which is for the inside curve, which can be hard to get to. I have just a little dowel with a coarse piece of suede on it. It's got a little bit of chromium oxide in it, and I go on the inside on both edges. And those two things combined will help keep it cutting nice and sharp. So I'm always getting those clean, crisp shavings as I progress. Keeps my work nice. So that's it. As you can see, in summary, all you need are a couple of specialized and thoughtfully designed knives for shaping the spoon, and a couple of ways to keep it sharp as you go, and of course some time and patience, and go for it. Good luck with your spoon.